We have to talk about fabulous historical outfits for a moment, if I hope you don't mind me doing so. So in September 2024, Chappell Roan, the Midwestern princess singer, was dubbed Joan of Arc. Clever pun, we do love a clever pun. After she appeared on stage at the VMAs clad in armour that was heavily inspired by the famed armour of Joan of Arc, the patron saint of France. Except, difference is, this Midwestern princess turned saint sang her hit single Good Luck Babe while she danced around fires rather than shouting prayers about the flames that devoured her body as she was burned alive. However, what is interesting about this performance and outfit is that it all happened to fall in the same month that Roan was subjected to very public metaphoric execution by her fans for cancelling concerts to rehearse for said VMA performance, for setting incredibly reasonable boundaries with fans and calling them out for their possessive, unhinged and entitled behaviour, and for not taking a sycophantic stance for Kamala Harris, because even though she is a woman who is evidently left-leaning and would never vote against LGBTQ+ rights, voting wasn't good enough. If she wasn't passionate about the candidate, that made her an enemy to the left, and by the end of September, Roan had become consumed by the flames of those she represented and with whom she sided. Now, this is a very different story from the teenage girl who was burned alive by the English for trying to take back Paris, but so much lies in the symbol of Joan's armour that it's actually quite easy to overlay onto Roan's message. Though no, before anyone says that the left eating the left echoes the Catholic Church killing Catholic Joan of Arc, it doesn't, because the Catholic Church did not kill Joan of Arc. I really want to help stop this narrative and meme perpetuating across the internet, because a lot of particularly atheistic bros try to use that as a gotcha moment, and it's completely inaccurate. The group of people who sentenced her were pro-England and pro-Burgundy, and they just so happened to be Catholic, but their motives for condemning her were because they were pro-English and she was an enemy of the English and the Burgundians, and they killed her specifically behind the church's back, very much intentionally. The English are the ones who killed her. The English are the ones who burned her at the stake, not the church. The Pope and the church had nothing to do with it. Anyway, Jones's androgyny and choice to wear men's clothing was her source of protection and a source of her downfall. As a teenager travelling with 6 men into lawless territory on her way to meet King Charles VII of France for the first time, masking and removing parts of her femininity helped protect her from sexual assault and derision. She became one of the guys. She chopped off her hair, she wore armour, she slept alongside the men platonically, she ate with them, etc. So her performance of masculinity and lack of heterosexual engagement have resulted in many contemporary scholars positing theories of her sexuality and gender identity. But I find that a little anachronistic, though not impossible. I would argue that while such theories are incredibly plausible, they overlook centuries-long traditions amongst orthodox religious figures, such as monks and nuns, who take vows of celibacy regardless of their sexuality, and they also overlook that nuns wear feminine garments purely because that's what the patriarchal church has instructed them to wear. Were they given the choice to design their own religious habit, who's to say that their choices would conform to feminine clothing? And again, such choices would not dictate their gender identity. After all, nuns didn't exactly have a choice in the matter. One of the 70 charges made against Joan of Arc was her decision to wear men's clothing. It was heretical to do so, according to Deuteronomy 22:5, which says, quote, "A woman shall not wear man's clothing, nor shall a man put on a woman's clothing, for whoever does these things is an abomination to the Lord your God." But I digress again. So as such, the image of Roan, a woman who is an advocate for women's rights and LGBTQ+ rights and gender expression, wearing armour that has been continuously analysed as a possible symbol of safety against sexual assault, gender expression and sexuality, fits her. It really does fit her. However, other iterations of Joan of Arc's armour in the fashion world have not been so intentional in poetically transposing such imagery onto the wearer. But before we get into it any further, I'd like to take a moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one website platform empowering individuals to create their online presence or launch a passion project. Combining 2 decades of industry-led design expertise with cutting-edge AI technology to unlock your strongest creative potential, Squarespace's Design intelligence empowers anyone to build a beautiful website tailored to their unique needs and craft a bespoke digital identity to use across one's entire online presence. I recently redesigned my website to reflect my colours, and then going forward into the new year, I'm redesigning my website again to launch my editorial and writing program system and all that jazz. I can do it really easy with Squarespace. I simply drag and drop content where I want it, and I can also just remarket it overnight like that. And like me, you can run your whole business easily from Squarespace as a one-platform solution, from receiving payments for products that you sell to donations from people who just like your content and want to give you a tip. Customers can pay with popular payment methods like Klarna, Apple Pay, Afterpay, and ClearPay. Squarespace also has intuitive scheduling facilities, which allows your customers to book appointments if you're a coach or a brick-and-mortar business. And it also allows you to engage with your customers through email campaigns that are super simple to set up thanks to their email templates. So if you want to expand your business or just build a beautiful website for your blogging leisure, then go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and then when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lady of the Library to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So Zendaya famously looked incredible in the custom metallic Versace gown in the 2018 Met Gala, but she didn't exactly carry any of the imagery with it, she just was there to look fire. Similarly, in 1998, Alexander McQueen paid homage to the saint with a collection called Joan, which timed perfectly with the release of the film The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc in 1999. Probably completely coincidental, but it just so happened to fall in line. And Joan of Arc's armour has been reappearing ever since in the fashion world, again most notably in Balenciaga's 2023 couture show, which closed with a Joan of Arc 3D printed 36-kilogram armoured dress made of galvanised resin and finished with a polished chrome. It's very cool looking. So Joan has become a cultural icon over the last 6 centuries, being regarded as a symbol, particularly in America and Britain, as one of feminine power, androgyny, and even sexuality, despite the historical figure herself likely being morally opposed to many of the areas her iconography has been ascribed to. You know, being a staunch 15th century Catholic and all that. We will obviously never know what her positions would have been on queer gender issues or even feminism, really. Though Joan was evidently a strong woman, her beliefs on what women should and should not be allowed to do will never be known. Christabel Pankhurst called Joan of Arc a militant woman's ideal, and Joan was a huge symbol for British suffrage during the movement in the early 20th century. Yet, considering the Roman Catholic Church was one of the biggest opponents to women's suffrage, it would entirely depend on whether Joan, in this anachronistic position where she's in the future, would have been motivated by her faith to fight for the rights of women to join the Catholic suffrage movement, or stay devoutly loyal to the church and the traditions it established for women. Many of us want to think this badass teenage girl donning armour and entering battles would have been an advocate for what we would have wanted her to and for ourselves. But as her motives were driven largely by her faith and in God, which way the hypothetical pendulum would have swung will never be known. People always have a bit of a fondness for moulding historical women into tragic heroes, which extends into mythology and folklore. I've already discussed that in another video about classical retellings and things like that. And I use the word woman here quite lightly because Joan was not even 20 years old before she was burned at the stake. She was, as my French teacher reminded us, just a little girl like me. When I was on a French exchange at just age 11, my female classmates and I were taken to Rouen, to the site where Joan was burned. She was propped up as this tragic little young girl who died far too young, and we little girls were taken there, like pilgrims, to admire her valour and be inspired by her bravery and ferocity. But to the French watching, we were little girls being taken to admire the sight of a far-right fascist symbol. You see, long before she was canonised, in 1920, Joan of Arc has been regarded as a symbol of reactionary nationalism, venerated by the far right. As Martha Hanna explains, Action Française, a far-right French monarchist and nationalist political movement, used Joan of Arc to create an alternative political idiom to that of republicanism. She became an emblem of integral nationalism, the symbol of true France. Hannah continues to explain that because Joan had contravened all established laws, those of her sex, her place in society and common practice, and even the established order, Action Française saw her in themselves. She had gone against the establishment not because she was capricious, but because she knew the establishment was a false one, not true France, and they admired her for it. In the 15th century, this false society was one imposed upon her by the English. But in 1908, false France, according to Action Française, was because of Jewish people and Freemasons. True France for them is one without Jews, immigrants and academics. Action Française went so far as to promote St. John's Feast Day as a royalist alternative to Bastille Day, and they rewarded young thugs who beat up secular academics with prizes named after her. In an article from 2020, Alison Miller explains that by World War II, Action Française was eclipsed by other proto-fascist groups, but even these new right-wing movements used Joan of Arc as a symbol of purity, Catholicism and Frenchness. Since the early 80s, France's far-right party, the National Front, FN, now the National Rally, has co-opted Joan's image, admiring her devotion to Catholicism and desire to expel foreign entities from France. It helps the far right that she was so androgynous, as her womanhood is excluded from the narrative in favour of her class, an impoverished young girl who rose through the ranks. The FN have frequently marched and rallied around her statue in Paris, with Jean-Marie Le Pen, the founder of the National Front, calling out to Joan for help when their rally was interrupted by bare-chested female activists, a Ukrainian radical feminist group, in 2015. This scene between the female and the National Front around Joan of Arc's statue must have been quite, fascinating. Two figures who represent both sides of what Joan's iconography symbolises, yelling at one another on either side of her statue. When speaking of Le Pen's daughter, Marine Le Pen, feminist theorist Dimitri Dimitriou wrote, "Like Joan, Le Pen's task of saving France acquires a Christic vocation that, however secularised, is genuinely spiritual and emotionally charged. In this respect, Marine Le Pen does not simply invoke Joan of Arc, she is Joan of Arc." So as you can see, Joan of Arc can be a feminist or fascist symbol depending on which elements of her character you choose to magnify. Whilst the British and the Americans, such as Vita Sackville-West, the suffragette Cecil B. DeMille, and designers, have seen her as a feminist symbol, those native to her country cannot uncouple her imagery from that which has been co-opted by the far-right ideologies, whether they agree with that image or not, in the same way many of us cringe with horror as we see our suffragette colours and flags being co-opted to spew hate and bigotry towards the trans community, trans women in particular. The Joan of Arc's armour, just like the suffragette flag, shows us that sometimes feminist iconography is messy, and people can use it for however they see fit. So maybe be wary of projecting any anachronistic meanings onto historical figures, because others who disagree with you can also do the same. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to my patrons, as always, for supporting my channel. And if you liked this video, please consider liking it and subscribing and sharing it with other people if you are so generous to do so. All my social medias are linked down below. I don't really use them much, but they are there, so there may be some odd little videos here and there on those. And I will see you soon for another video. And remember, be happy and healthy, and books save lives. So keep reading.